So, the first thing we need to do before we start any job search, whether it be I want to get a promotion to I want something totally new, I need a change, we need to become very clear on what we're targeting.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to my podcast, Extraordinary with Chirag. Today, I am in conversation with Kamara Toffolo. Kamara has been recognized as one of the top voices on LinkedIn. Along with that, she's also an extremely sought after career coach and job strategist. Therefore, if you're someone who's new to Canada or North America in general and you're looking for your first job, or you're someone who wants to level up in their career, this podcast is for you. During my conversation with Kamara, we talk about topics such as optimizing your LinkedIn profile, tapping into the power of personal branding, importance of networking, and demystifying the concept or the myth around Canadian experience. I had an absolute blast talking to Kamara, and she shares some extremely valuable insights and information during the entire course of our conversation. I would particularly direct you towards the Actionable Insights section because the information that Kamara has shared with us during that conversation in that section is something that you can almost immediately apply to your job search strategy. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Kamara. Great to have you on the show, Kamara. Thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
I was going through your LinkedIn profile. You've had quite an interesting journey. Now, starting as a sales assistant back in the day at Manulife to
Way back in the
now
day.
being to now being a career coach strategist, it's been quite a ride, and you've been recognized as one of the top voices on LinkedIn, which is a big deal because there's so many people talking about so many things in here. You are the subject matter expert, so even more excited to have you on the show.
Thank you.
During this transition, during this period, during this journey, you have worked within different industries and different roles. So my first question to you would be that what propelled you to branch out on your own?
What propelled me to branch out on my own really was that I was feeling particularly unfulfilled in my first career, my first career being financial services. So that's where the sales assistant comes in. I was assisting Manulife financial advisors, basically doing sales enablement. Yeah, going from there into more financial planning and then into fintech, I just reached a point where I was like, this is not for me. Even though I'm 13 years in, this is not for me. And I probably should have thought twice about it. And after some soul searching and reflection, I realized that what I really wanted to do was help people avoid what I was experiencing, which was being in a career that we weren't suited for, maybe, or attempting to get into a career where we're better suited. That led me down the path of getting trained as a coach and apprenticing in resume writing and so on and so forth.
That's fantastic to hear. And you give me personally a lot of hope because Extraordinary is based on that entire career pivot that I'm going through. After having worked within automotive and marketing for a while, I realized that, hey, I need to leave a more lasting impression where my goal is to help and inspire others through these conversations, which provide them hope and clarity, hopefully. And the goal is to be able to provide them with actionable insights that help them unleash their extraordinary potential at the same time. As I explore and embark on this journey, I'm trying to seek the extra within me as well. And that's what this conversation is all about. So we are off to a great start. And now what I want to ask you is that once you took that leap of faith, right?
Yes.
What has been the most rewarding part of this journey?
I think the most rewarding part is obviously being able to have a more direct impact on the lives of the people who I serve. So that's wonderful. And the impact actually reaches beyond working with my clients because I know that many of them are teaching their colleagues, teaching their family, friends, things that they've learned from me. So, and hopefully eventually their children will also learn from what they've learned. So that's wonderful. And I'm also really proud of the fact that I built a business. Like I am very fulfilled by the actual building of the business and learning all the ins and outs of building a business and wearing all the hats. And one thing I was reflecting on before our chat is what when I was about to depart my last corporate job, which was I departed, I guess, over 8.5 years ago, or about 8.5 years ago. Um, I remember a colleague said to another colleague behind my back, there's no way she can make money doing this. And I haven't been back in 8.5 years, have I? I haven't returned. So I guess something's going right.
Absolutely. And was that, did you use that statement as fuel to just make sure that you're going to be at it? Or was it something that you like, people have to say something, good or bad?
I mean, I wasn't really surprised. Knowing the source, I wasn't really surprised. So I won't get into details, but knowing the
Sure.
source, I wasn't that surprised. They had they were known for poop talking a little bit, and and so yeah, it just didn't come as a shock. But yes, I do use that as fuel. One thing I love is being underestimated, because it's like, okay, well, I'll show you.
That's
and
amazing.
and I think a lot of my clients share that feeling as well, because a lot of them are trying to move on to jobs at organizations where they're more valued, and so because they are underestimated in their current roles, so it's
This
good
is
fuel.
absolutely. And perfect segue into my next question, because I
Mhm.
have done this, Kamara. I went onto the profile. I read the 91 recommendations that are on there,
All
because
of
it
them.
just gives all of them.
Wow.
And and I have a couple that I have taken out. One which was right at the beginning, and
Mm-hmm.
one which is fairly recent. I'm not going to name the names here,
Okay.
but I want the audience to know this and hear this, because this is
Okay.
not a plug-in from me. This is genuinely what people have to say. That I'm truly honored to have had the opportunity to work with Kamara.
Mm.
I have had many, many compliments on the look and tone of my resume. I was feeling a little low after a recent layoff, and after Kamara redid my resume and profile, I was reminded that I do, in fact, have a lot to offer, and it's been a great confidence builder.
Mm.
Kamara truly listens to you, asks great questions, and provides advice and support. She's the total package, and I can't recommend her highly enough. She will be my first call when I land my dream job. This is one. I'm going to read out one more, which is
Sure.
Kamara is a real life superhero. Her ability to create and articulate an amazing resume, cover letter, and LinkedIn profile from just a 2 hour chat that felt like I was talking to an old friend the whole time is
Mm.
better than I expected. And this is after I read through her reviews and watched a handful of her YouTube videos. I highly recommend her to anyone, regardless of if they are in transition, looking to transition, or are completely happy where they currently are. So, one thing we can establish clearly is that all your clients love you.
Oh, that's really nice. Yeah, I mean, I love them, so they're the reason I do what I do.
um, I'm going to ask you two questions regarding this. And
Yeah.
one thing that stood out when I was reading all these recommendations that you've gotten is the fact that something which is a big confidence killer is the imposter syndrome, whether I'm worth it or not. So most
Mm.
of the people that you've helped has said that you've helped them cull out information and achievements that they thought didn't really matter.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate on this mindset of imposter syndrome that job seekers go through? How can people overcome this and build Dwight Schrute like confidence?
Dwight Schrute, like he is very confident. He is very alpha male,
Absolutely.
isn't he? um, so I think the reason that so many job seekers are feeling imposter syndrome is because of either receiving negative feedback at work in the form of, well, purely negative feedback or a toxic workplace, or no feedback, and not being recognized for their contributions. So the more and more that happens, or the more and more you're not recognized, it really just chips away at that confidence. So you start day one at a new job with a lot of excitement and hopefully confidence, and feeling ready to tackle this new adventure. And then you're like, after a year or maybe 2 years, 3 years, and so on, where it's not the ideal environment for you, just chips away. And so I think that's why a lot of people look outside for a new opportunity where they will feel less imposter syndrome and at least feel more valued. And I think that the real way to fight imposter syndrome is to seek, external validation. And so I think that's why my work helps alleviate some of that imposter syndrome, because it feels like it's an external validation of value that my clients bring to the table, the accomplishments that they have achieved throughout their careers, because it feels like external validation, but really I'm holding a mirror up to them and I'm just reflecting back things they say, um, energy that they give off when they talk about certain work, um, things where they express they want more of this, less of this. I'm just holding up a mirror showing them, you said this. And it's not uncommon when I am writing resumes, it's not uncommon for me to actually take a literal full soundbite of something they say and insert it into something in LinkedIn cover letter resume. And so it's powerful. I think that's powerful when they see it through my lens, although it's really just, I'm a very neutral third party. I mean, I'm their cheerleader, but I'm very neutral in that I'm not assessing their accomplishments as being inflated or bloated or boastful, braggadocious. I'm not assessing them in that sense. It's pure, as far as I'm concerned, pure marketing, and it's the facts. And so that's where the mirror comes in. I'm showing you the facts of all the great things that you've done at work, and you should be proud of these. And so I think that external validation really helps. And so if we're not working with someone like me and we're just trying to work on that imposter syndrome, I think that it would be very valuable to seek out feedback from people you trust and who genuinely care about you, to hear from them what they think you're good at, where they think your strengths are, just to get a little bit of a boost, because we all need it sometimes. It's just, everybody has imposter syndrome, I think, even Dwight.
Absolutely. Building on what you just said, that external validation, sorry, is important as well, because the next step after the resume is getting shortlisted and then giving that
Right.
interview, and
Right.
you need that confidence going into those, right?
Totally. You absolutely do. And you need to really take ownership of what you've accomplished. And that takes some work. And I think having a kind of refurbished resume is helpful, because you can see it on paper. Once things are on paper, they feel more concrete. And so it's easier to start internalizing. So we've got the external validation. Now we can internalize these stories and these accomplishments and really take ownership, and bring them into our personal brand.
Absolutely. And building on this theme as well is something that stood out from when I was reading recommendations and the testimonials that people have put up. One of the things that really stood out and resonated with me was the fact that you help people decode themselves. And let me elaborate what I mean by this. That many a times I've felt that there are certain roles that I've missed out, wherein if the people judge me purely by my resume, which did not reflect my true personality and who I am. On paper, I wasn't a fit, but if they would have spoken with me, I would have cracked that job. And I'm sure and certain that I am not the only one who feels like that. That said, confession as well. And
this is ironic that that resume or our LinkedIn profile is what brings us all the money because of which we are able to do all the things because, hey, we're in a world which is transactional and we need money for that. That said, it is by far the most tedious job to be able to put that resume together. Then you have imposter syndrome where you're not able to talk about yourself as you can. Am I saying too much of I over here? Is it supposed to be we did this? And then, of course, my personality would never shine through. But people have said that your resumes and the way your what makes you unique is how their personality comes through. So please elaborate on this approach. That what's your secret sauce here?
Okay, yeah, that's a big question. So I think when we talk about personality on resumes, it's a word we use to capture a bigger feeling or a bigger tone or vibe, so to speak, of our resumes. And so the challenge with resumes is, as you had mentioned, they are tedious, and they do follow a traditional format. And so with that traditional format, we need to work within the kind of the confines and the limitations of it. Where we get to play and have a little bit more room to be expressive is the content in the resume, so the stories that we share. But when we want to share our personality, so for me, part of my personality is I love humor, I love to be sarcastic, I love to crack jokes. But if I'm writing my resume, I'm probably not going to say I have a great sense of humor or I'm the world's biggest Office fan or anything like that. That's not really appropriate on a resume. But what is appropriate and what does read well is where we talk about ideas that we've had. So if you've had an idea to do something, you can talk like to create something at work. Say you had an idea to optimize a process. We can talk about that and the results. And then these themes will start to come out. And I think that's where the personality really comes out, is the themes within the resume, the themes of what you're really, really great at doing and where that matches what you really love doing. That's where the uniqueness comes in. We can also talk about any unique approaches you might have to solving certain types of problems. And at the end of the day, the most important part of resume writing, LinkedIn writing, cover letter writing is to show how you create solutions to your future employer's problems within the role that you're targeting.
That's so much of information right there. We started this conversation by you talking about a career pivot that you made 13 years into your career. And I want to stay on that topic. So, you've done a video, which I'm going to share in the link below as well, which spoke about transferable skills when you're making a career pivot, moving from one industry to another. You've also done that of sorts within your career in the 13-year career as well, because when I saw, you're perfect, more than qualified to talk about this because, hey, you've been there, done that, and smashed it out of the park. So, can you tell me more about how people listening who are in the middle of either transitioning or making that transition and thinking about that career pivot, how should they approach their job search?
So, the first thing we need to do before we start any job search, whether it be I want to get a promotion to I want something totally new, I need a change, we need to become very clear on what we're targeting. So that needs to happen before anything else happens. And so we can arrive on our career clarity and our target job many different ways. There's no one specific way that we can get there or that we should get there, but people work with career clarity coaches, might take some strengths finder assessments. For me, I recommend the book and coaches that coach the UMAP approach that really delves into your different strengths, your values, your skills, and how all marries up into your target job. Or you could do some soul searching and self reflection, which is what I did. I didn't work with anyone in order to arrive on a decision for what I was going to pursue. We need to start there. That needs to happen before anything else happens, because the target job informs literally every aspect of our job search. So it informs us what skills we have that are transferable to that particular job. I'll back up, because all skills, by the very nature of being skills, are transferable. It's just, are they transferable to that job that you're targeting? We don't know. We need to look at the job posting. We need to have a target. We need to have a target job, and we need to look at the job posting for that target job to know. So we need to start there, consider our transferable skills, and then think about the ways that we can reframe the work experience, particularly if we're making a pivot, reframe our work experience so that it demonstrates those transferable skills. Because we can't use kind of old accomplishments for new directions. We can, but we need to do some translating there. So, like, for example, if we take me as an example, so I went from fintech into career coaching or job search coaching. And so my ability to analyze code isn't really helpful as in doing what I do now. But what is helpful is my experience engaging with developers and project managers, who are kind of the bulk of my client base at this point. So that's how I would have reframed it if I was writing a resume for my current job, is I would talk about that as opposed to really good at analyzing code, you know. So and so, as you can see, the target job is just, it informs everything. So from there, it would help us shape our interview answers as we're preparing for interviews. It helps us with our networking, so we can advise the people who are meeting what we're targeting for our new target job, whether it's a pivot or a promotion or what have you. So that's really where it all starts. That's where we start identifying those transferable skills.
I absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I think you've seen enough proof of concept where people have successfully transitioned and made these pivots, right? What really has stood out for them, apart from the fact that, yes, there is that belief that you're able to articulate this really well to the person on the other side, but staying on this, is there something which particularly stood out for within the candidates that you've trained and coached, that they were able to successfully do this?
Who are making these big pivots?
Yes.
So you nailed it with identifying that target job. I would say, in addition to that, like in terms of a big kind of check off on the checklist for career pivoting, is to fully understand why you're doing this, reframe it so that it is employer friendly,
Right.
and be very clear on the unique value that you can bring from your previous career, previous experience into the new direction. So I was having a conversation on YouTube recently. In the comments, someone said they were going from product manager to data analyst. Not a huge departure, in my opinion. I can see that. I can see many threads connecting the two, but I asked them, what's your reason for doing this? And their answer was, because my skills will always be in demand. And I said, okay, but what's your employer friendly answer for that? They don't care about your goals for your own skills. They want to know how you can apply your skills to make a difference for them. And
Right.
so that's what we need to be clear on. I mean, it's good to know at deep down, like, are you looking for more work-life balance? Are you looking for higher pay? That's good to know. Just file that away in your memory and then make sure that you are thinking of ways that would be more attractive to an employer and sound more, or that would resonate better with the employer. That's what it really comes down to.
I think eventually with the LinkedIn profile optimization, resume building, and the confidence boost that you're providing your clients, it's helping them shape their personal brand.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's the topic that I want to dive into now, personal branding.
Good segue.
Perfect segue, right? And there are two phases to it, I believe. One, of course, like what you're helping with, and that's what we're going to dive into. And the second one is once you've landed the job, and then what you're doing and how you're extending your personal brand, right? But let's start with the first part, which is that how important is it to have this personal branding, especially in this digital age that we live in now, where you're working remote, And the first thing people are doing is looking at your LinkedIn profiles to see who you are, what you stand for, what your values are, etc.
Sure. Having a personal brand is essential. Whenever it comes to career growth, job search, it's all about marketing yourself. So the brand is important. It's vital because it helps people understand how you can help and where you would really fit in well in terms of an organization or a team. And yeah, so our personal brand is not something that just exists digitally, just exists on our LinkedIn, although that's where it's particularly evident and particularly in your face. But resumes will show an aspect of personal brand because we're writing them towards target jobs and we're talking about the difference that we can make, the value that we can bring to the table, our unique value proposition. And so yeah, it's really the basis of everything that we're writing, every way we're showing up online, digitally, as well as in person. But I think that a lot of folks get really kind of weirded out about personal brand because it's such a big concept. It sounds very salesy, very marketing, although I do promote kind of a marketing approach to job searching and career growth. But it feels intense and it feels like a really lofty concept as well. And so I don't think we need to stress out so much about having our personal brand presented in a certain way, more so concern ourselves with, are we showing up how we want to show up and for what we want to be known for? And that's really what it comes down to. I don't think we need to stress out about it and worry about all the different ways that we're branding ourselves.
No, and definitely one thing I would want to pitch in over here and say that you're probably the most qualified to talk about it because it's become sort of a buzz lately, this entire personal brand thing, because where you see so many people talking about it. And again, when I was stalking your LinkedIn profile, I saw that you mentored and spoke about strategies and tips in boosting your personal brand back in 2016. So you've known this space, you've seen how this has evolved, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And it's, yeah, it's funny you bring that up because I have personal branding on my, like the topic of personal branding on my LinkedIn profile, but I rarely talk about it. Like in my posts on LinkedIn, I don't talk about personal branding specifically, but that is part of my personal brand, if that makes sense. It's like
It does.
anti-personal brand, but that is part of my personal brand in that I'm talking about, or I guess I would demonstrate how I show up without calling it out as personal brand. It's just my consistent use of social media, consistent use or consistent ways that I talk, the tone I use, what I talk about, where I offer advice. That's my personal brand rather than saying this, rather than having like a flashing sign saying personal brand here. Now let's talk about job search because that's my personal brand, you know? So
Makes sense. And extending this to the immigrants, I feel strongly about this community. I am one. I came to this country 5 years back, and we would use LinkedIn in a very different way back in India. It was
mhm.
just, randomly sending people connection requests, receiving them, and saying yes. And I mean, majority of the people, I don't know about other countries you see from India, they have lots of connections. But
Yes.
really, are they that well connected? No, because I have people who have been connected with for about 7, 8, 9, 10 years, but
Mhm.
probably never met them, never had a single conversation. So
It's true.
any piece of advice that you can give the immigrants and community revolving around personal branding, etc., and LinkedIn, that what they should be keeping in mind when they transition to a new country and a new culture?
Sure. Well, first of all, welcome. Welcome to you, Chirag. I hope the 5 years here have treated you well so far.
Absolutely loved it.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Yeah, so I guess my advice would be to make sure that you are treating networking and say reaching out on LinkedIn as an example as a quality over quantity kind of approach. So, I mean, we've all gotten that dopamine hit when we've found that we've grown our follower base or connections base by like, you know, a couple hundred, like, yeah, that's great. More people in my network. But that's really a vanity metric, and it doesn't really boil down to anything meaningful. What's meaningful is having those real true connections with other people, having actual conversations, whether they be online or offline. It doesn't really matter as far as I'm concerned. But when we are doing reach outs, especially cold reach outs, reaching out to strangers, essentially, we want to have a very specific reason why we're reaching out to these people. We don't just want to reach out to anyone and everyone, because that's just not going to garner any results for us, and that's just not going to lead to long-term relationships. So if there's someone we've been admiring for a while, and we'd like to be connected with them, then tell them we're admiring them. Tell them why you admire them. Like, Chirag, I really love your brand colors. Your use of yellow, like that, it really stood out to me, and I just want to see more of what you're all about. Can I connect with you? Or I'd like to connect with you. Just something as simple as that. Like, we don't need to overcomplicate it. Remember that there's another person at the end of the conversation. And yeah, just be very specific, and reach out to the people who you can just see yourself being connected with long term. So there's no need to just reach out to people randomly. Think of your target employers. Think of people who have gone before you, done the things that you want to do. Those are the people I can think of connecting with or prioritizing connections with.
Thank you for sharing that. And I have another confession. I love how you've used green as well.
Oh, thank you.
I'm a big fan of branding. That's something that's the world I come from. So, it was easy to see. And then when I sent you the pitch, I had changed the picture when I was promoting it. So, I mean, these little nuances one does, notice.
It stands out.
It stands out.
Yeah. And that's part of your personal brand, right? So
I wanted to understand the myth surrounding Canadian experience. A lot of us who come from to this country, it's not as if we've forgotten what we did back home. There is a lot of work that we put in, and good work. And what I'm proud of is the fact that the new age of immigrants who are coming in are bloody qualified, have worked with great brands, right? So we are not just coming to do any job that is thrown at us. Yes, it does take an impact it does make an impact on your confidence when you're told that you don't have Canadian experience. But hey, I've not forgotten what I did. What is that supposed to mean? So, but it's the lay of the land. I need to wrap my head around it and still understand. So why not ask from expert like you that what is Canadian experience?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll just tell you, I'll just start with telling you I'm equally as pissed off by the whole Canadian experience BS. Unfortunately, we see it a lot. It is a realistic hurdle that should not be there, that is preventing great and very talented newcomers from landing in jobs. It drives me crazy, and it is a concern that every one of my newcomer clients will bring up with me, even if they have Canadian experience. So they worry that's how pervasive this is. They worry that they're going to look at my previous experience before my Canadian experience and completely discount it, or just look at that, not my Canadian experience. And so, yeah, it's very frustrating. And so we need to do our best to position ourselves in a way that emphasizes the more relatable work experience that Canadians who are very Canadian can relate to. So when we're talking about Canadian experience, sorry, I skipped over that part of the question. When we're talking about that Canadian experience, we're talking about experience that you have gained in Canada with perhaps a Canadian-based company. So we're looking for, you're in Canada, you're working with or for a Canadian-based company. I don't think there's much discrimination over whether it's a US-based company or not. We're okay with that typically, but yeah, outside of North America, there's just such a strong bias towards, or against, I should say, non-Canadian experience. So how we can fight it? We want to make sure that we're following Canadian resume standards. That is very important. And I have a whole playlist, new to North America playlist on my YouTube channel. There is a resume tutorial on there for newcomers. So it's kind of a crash course on writing a resume for the Canadian market. So we'll get into some more specifics in that video, but just kind of high level. Just kind of piggybacking on what you said, Chirag, about having worked with great brands. When we've worked with clients who are internationally recognized, or are Canadian based or US based or kind of Western based, we want to make sure we're kind of name dropping these brands and clients when we can in our resume. When we have the opportunity to talk about dealing with, say, a Canadian based product or vendor, or US based product or vendor, we can talk about that. We can emphasize any way that we traveled internationally to engage with clients or whomever. If we had assignments abroad, outside of our home country, if we were maybe sent to the UK to do some work on a project, let's say, we can emphasize that. And if we've gone or completed any schooling, even if it's remote and online, if we've completed any schooling that was with a school based in North America or like UK, Europe, we want to emphasize that as well. So there's ways to kind of build on Canadian or Canadian adjacent experience or education so that we don't seem like we're completely without any Canadian, we've never touched anything Canadian. We have other ways to kind of get around it a little bit so that we can almost prompt the reader to open their eyes and see, like, hello, like, I wasn't just working my home country on only my home country stuff. I am a person of the globe, and my work is valuable, and I have valuable skills that I can offer. And if there's a way that you can also emphasize how your international experience can solve the Canadian employer's specific problems, that's great too, because there are a lot of Canadian companies with overseas clients, or there's a lot of Canadian companies with overseas or offshore teams. If you can emphasize your work experience and leadership there, that'll help a lot too.
You've hit a home run for me with that answer. Thank you so much. And I genuinely, right now, I'm a little envious of all those people who are coming in to the country. And there is so much more access to career coaches and awareness as opposed to what it was 5 years back when I came in. I would have been able to make my transition so much easier if I would have had access to you at the time, or I would have done enough research. After listening to what you've just said, this kind of guidance is extremely important. And this is one of the reasons why I started this podcast, where I can help people get to people like yourself, because I didn't have that access, or I didn't work hard enough, and podcasts weren't such a big thing back in the day. But thank you very much for sharing this, and I will cover this, that why do you feel that there are people who still have reservations and not working with a career coach, because that is so important. That little bit of money that you spend is going to make your life easier, and all that mental torture that you would be going through, suffering through all the mental health issues, can go away just by working with someone. But I will come back to that in my next section. Okay. One thing that I know that people are going to do a lot now, basis what you're saying, and we're already adapting to Chat GPT. We have this amazing AI tool which can help write things for us. And now, immediately 6 months after the launch, people are saying that now we look for mistakes in the way you write, because that's what shows that you're a human. So I don't know how this balance, what's the balance here? But the question to you is that everybody right now is a content creator. They can write really well because they put things into Chat GPT.
Mm-hmm.
The game changer is that Chat GPT can probably get you a foot in the door. But then this conversation is going to be real. If I don't talk the way I write, there is going to be a bit of a challenge. So, what's your 2 cents on Chat GPT and how people should be using that?
So I think Chat GPT is fascinating. I think AI is fascinating, and there is a lot of potential with Chat GPT. There's a lot of potential to get it wrong as well. So I really encourage use of Chat GPT responsibly. And what I like to use Chat GPT for is input, not output. So input meaning use it to get some ideas for how you might write about a particular project, or might write about how you engage clients, or whatever you want to be talking about. So ask Chat GPT the questions and get the input, which you input into your brain, and then write something that is inspired by that answer from Chat GPT. We don't want Chat GPT to be doing all the writing for us. That's where we get into dangerous territory. So we want to make sure that everything is in our voice, exactly as you were saying. It's going to be weird if you're writing one way and then you show up at an interview another way, and you're not using the same terminology, not using the same language, and then the interviewer is totally thrown. So we want to avoid that.
Yeah, that's a performance worth a Dundee, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. My next section is actionable insights, and this is a section which, wherein the listeners can take certain few immediate actionable insights from our conversation, apply it to their lives, and
Sure.
create an impact. So I will dive into LinkedIn first. That's what I'm going to start with.
Okay.
How important is the top banner on our LinkedIn profile? One tip that you can share with the audience to optimize that.
Sure. So it could go either way. So I do think it's important because it is more real estate for you to use, to either use an image that captures your personal brand, or add a few words about your kind of claim to fame in terms of what you're really great at work. So in that sense, it's important because it's real estate offered up to you. Why not use it? So there's that. At the end of the day, if you don't have it, is a recruiter going to look like pass you by because you don't have it? Likely not. They're looking at your qualifications. But having that LinkedIn banner or LinkedIn background photo there, and in using nice imagery, just gives some visual appeal to your LinkedIn profile, adds to your personal brand, and also makes your profile look complete. Without it, it looks like you've overlooked something, but it really gives some nice kind of packaging to your profile. And you wanted one tip for the
Yes.
background photo?
Yes, please.
So the background photo, my tip would be to, I guess, make sure that if you are using an image, let's say you're using a stock photo, which I think is fine to use. First of all, make sure that you can use it and you have the rights to it.
Absolutely.
So make sure it's a free photo, and make sure that it properly captures your personal brand. So I've seen like people use river and like a scene of river and mountains, and I'm like, what does this mean to you? And they're like, I don't know, it's a nice photo. So that's not really the best use of the background photo. We want to use something that's going to be meaningful to our personal brand. And I have used, when I've been helping crop the photos, I've used personal photos. Like one of my clients has a photo of her grandfather, but it is just a gorgeous photo, and it does speak to her personal brand. And then I've used like a boardroom photo because it does speak to that person's personal brand. So we just need to make sure that is really capturing what we're all about, and just appropriate for our what we're trying to market in terms of being a professional.
Thank you for that.
Welcome.
One recommendation that you can share with the audience that will help them improve their LinkedIn profile.
Okay. So, one thing that they can do to improve their LinkedIn profile is let's hone in on the headline, because this is where I see a lot of missteps. With the headline, we don't want to keyword jam in there. So I don't want to write something that says career coaching, resumes, LinkedIn, interviews, and just leave it at that. Instead, we want to talk about what we want to lead with what our target job is. So let's say we're going for a marketing role, so a senior marketing role, so senior manager marketing, and then usually I use a colon after that, and then I follow it up with the value proposition, your personal value proposition, or kind of the main solution that you're known to create at companies. So something like creating uh, creating digital marketing campaigns that capture audiences and drive multi-million dollar revenue or something like that. So key, target job title followed up by main solution you create, not just throwing in a ton of keywords.
Got that. One mistake that you see majority people making, which they can avoid.
Just using LinkedIn as their resume, like basically copying and pasting from their resume. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we are using LinkedIn in a different way because it serves a different purpose. Don't forget that it is social media and that we want to make sure that we are keeping it personalized and conversational sounding. So that means speaking in first person as opposed to third person.
Yeah, I see that a lot as well. And I was like, okay. And when I see the number of followers, I'm like, you're not that big that, the conversation in the about section and and the achievements are listed as somebody, as a third person. So I'm like,
Right.
okay, this is interesting. But maybe that's something that I haven't been able to wrap my head around. Validation from you is extremely important. Thank you for providing me that.
No problem.
Next up is networking. And of course, right now we are going through this phase where we are going through recession, there are layoffs, etc. So overall, in terms of leveling up, in terms of building these meaningful relationships, what is it, any tips and tricks that you could share on how to network better?
How to network better. So I think this goes back to what we were talking about earlier in that we want to be focused in our networking. So we don't want to try and network with anybody and everybody because we can't possibly create relationships with anybody and everybody. But we want to make sure that we're networking with the folks who we can see ourselves connected to long term. Another thing is we don't want to overcomplicate networking. I see a lot of people not network because it feels weird. It feels misaligned with them, and I get that. We can always start in our own backyard. So when you think about the university that you went to, there's alumni networks. That's a baked in network right there, a big one too. We can always consider networking with our own friends and family. We just never know who knows who. Like even when you think of your own mother, you don't know for sure who she knows or who she doesn't know. We just don't. And we don't know what could come of the second degree and third degree connections either. And also, if you belong to any professional associations, like say, if you're a project manager and you belong to PMI, or if you are an accountant and belong to like CPA Ontario, let's say, there's always events being held by those types of organizations, and there's networking built into that as well, and a whole network also baked in. So we don't need to look too far to network, and we don't have to go to complete strangers always to network. So make it easy on yourself.
Amazing. Thank you for that. One of the things that as a newcomer that I realized that, and I was not exposed to this concept back in the day, was that you need to start having informational interviews. And of course, now having been here for a while, and also in general, I think informational interviews are key because that way you can, that's the next step after networking, right? Or networking leads to informational interviews. The question to you is that any tips and tricks on landing informational interviews?
Right.
And once we land these, how can we make a lasting impression?
Right. Okay. So informational interviews, I do see them as part of networking. And so I think the key with informational interviews, the key to approaching them and asking for them is to make sure that it's clear that you are using them as a learning opportunity. So we don't want to go into these conversations or even ask for these conversations with the pretense that you're going to ask for a job. That's just not the appropriate use of an informational interview. In fact, I don't like the term informational interview because it implies job getting. And I don't think that that's appropriate. And so I would just call it a networking meeting. And when we're messaging, asking for these networking meetings with strangers, perhaps, the importance is to be clear as to why we're reaching out to them. It would be helpful if you mentioned something about what you admired about, say, their career, their body of work, what they post on social media, what have you, and that you would love to ask them a few questions or learn from them or get their advice around achieving success doing whatever it is specifically. And then ask them for 15 minutes of their time, whether it's phone or Zoom or whatever they choose, and just thank them, for considering you for that. And you're not going to get yeses all the time, but you will improve your chances of getting a yes for an informational interview if you make it very clear you're just trying to learn rather than explore opportunities, let's say.
Thank you for sharing that. Moving on is my job search section where I'll be throwing a few questions at you.
Okay.
You have answered this, but I will throw it one more time. Job search, volume versus quality, your recommendation.
Quality, always. This is where our target job comes in. So I'm often hearing, I applied for hundreds of jobs, but I'm not getting interviews. The problem is you've applied for hundreds of jobs. It's probably been a job search strategy that's been very unfocused, scattered all over the place. So we need to bring it back to the basics, get clear on that target job, be selective on what we're applying to, make sure it is that target job so that our resume can do the proper talking.
Absolutely. And while we do that, and we focus on a couple of jobs which resonate the most with us and our value set. We put in the time and the effort to also build a cover letter, which also makes the entire job process quite tedious and difficult. But do HR professionals end up reading cover letters?
Well, I think a lot of us are concerned with whether our cover letter is getting read or not, but we should not be concerning ourselves with that because it's out of our control. We can't control what happens with even our resume once it's on the other end. We don't know. So we need to concern ourselves more with, are we providing the necessary information to help us be considered as a candidate for this role? And cover letters are, it's kind of a mixed bag in terms of cover letters. Some people say, write them. Some people say don't write them. A lot of recruiters say I don't read them. But then there are a lot of job postings where it actually says in the job posting that a cover letter is required. There are many hiring managers who still ask for cover letters or are expecting one to land on their desk with the resume. And so at worst, our cover letter is not read, but we've done some interview prep. At best, our cover letter is read and taken into consideration for our candidacy. So it's a very low risk investment of time for potential, ROI. So, but I do really realize that it feels like a big undertaking to write cover letters. So can I plug my cover letter guide here?
Absolutely.
So I have a cover letter guide that you can sign up for and download on my website in the free stuff menu, and that should really help. And I do basically advocate for a templated approach to resume writing, not a template, but a templated approach. And so That means that we're not reinventing the structure of our cover letter every single time, which will help save us time. So there's a lot of different ways that we can save the time, and I don't expect you to rewrite a new cover letter for every job opportunity. You'll have the cover letter bones to work with, and then you just plug in what's necessary for that particular job posting. Sounds
Thank
good?
you for sharing that. Ideal resume length based on experience. What would you say? What is an ideal resume length based on experience? So somebody for a newcomer, mid-level career, and somebody who's a seasoned professional with, let's say, over 15, 20 years of experience.
Okay, so there's a lot of stress over resume length. You'll see a lot of people saying, no, it has to be 1 page, even if you're an experienced professional. And that's not really true in practice. We want our resume to be as long as it needs to be in order to tell our story the right way. And so that could be 2 pages. I've even seen a new grad on 2 pages. Sometimes it happens. And I've written resumes. I think the longest resume I wrote was 5 pages, I think, if I remember correctly. But that was for a C-suite executive with a lot of board experience. So I would say the sweet spot for a lot of professionals is going to be a 2-page resume. If I were to put a guideline around it, and I stress the word guideline because I don't want this to be considered a rule, because every situation is different. But the guideline would be if you have under 5 years of work experience, I would think you'd be on a 1-page resume. If you have more than 5 years work experience in your target profession, I would expect to see a 2-page resume. If you are a C-suite executive, I would expect you to be on a 3-page resume or 4-page resume. If you're just under C-suite, so maybe you're like an SVP or a VP or even senior director level, 2 to 3 pages, or 2 or 3 pages, I would expect to see. More likely 3 when you're more senior. So again, that sweet spot, I think, for most of us is going to be a 2-page resume.
Profile pictures on resumes, yay or nay?
Pictures on resumes?
Yes.
Absolutely not. Not in the North American market, and I can't speak to the European market. So I'm not speaking to that market at all, but I would say, generally speaking, Asian market, Australian, North American, no pictures, please. Thank you. No. No pictures. And the reason for this is they're unexpected. So our reader's going to be like, huh, why am I seeing a picture? And immediately bias is going to kick in. Whether they think they're bias free or not, bias is going to kick in. You could be the most beautiful person on the planet and bias is still going to kick in. So save yourself from exposing yourself to unnecessary bias, and do not include a picture. It's not going to help.
One podcast that you would recommend?
Other than yours?
Other than mine. Thank you.
One of my favorite podcasts, long-term podcasts, but it's not related to anything around professional development, is The Minimalists. I really like that podcast. Have you listened to it?
I've heard about it, and from a lot of people. I haven't had the time to dive into it, but definitely on my list.
Yeah, I really enjoy theirs particularly, and it's because I'm always kind of on the pursuit of being a minimalist myself.
Right.
But yeah, I really enjoy that one. I like the production, everything about it. So that's the one that I can recommend.
And somehow, if I can connect the dots over here, it does make sense, because even when it comes to, when I asked you questions around personal branding, when I asked you questions around how we should take networking or our approach towards networking, the idea is, I think the inherent philosophy that you follow is keep things simple and not overcomplicated. Probably that flows into the philosophy of being a minimalist as well.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. I do try and approach job searching from a minimalist point of view to a certain extent. So I appreciate you saying that and calling that out.
Thank you. One book that you would recommend?
Oh boy. So my all-time classic favorite book is How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's yeah, that's my all-time favorite book ever.
One skill that you would say that everyone should develop.
I would say that everybody needs to develop proficiency with collaboration tools,
Mhm.
digital collaboration tools. I should work on being able to say it. Anyway, so we're talking about the G Suites, we're talking about Zoom, we're talking about Slack, and things like that. It's really important in our day and age for you to be able to collaborate digitally with your colleagues. And I would say, if you're going to take any online training, which by the way you can get for free, on these topics, I would say get proficient in those tools.
That's great advice. One last thing before I let you go. I know that you've recently launched a new program which is called Resume Roast. So anybody who's listening into this and wants to know more about it, can you just share a little bit of information about Resume Roast, please?
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to. So Resume Roast is a resume review that will take your resume from meh to yay. It is what I consider a critique, but with compassion. So what we do under the Resume Roast is, assuming that you have identified your target job and you've already written your resume, with the Resume Roast service, I can and will review your resume, and I will mark up your resume with red font, and I will also provide an accompanying video. So basically, as I'm reviewing your resume, I narrate the review. So when I send it back to you, everything back to you, you've got your marked up resume for your homework, as well as the video to guide you through my thoughts and suggestions and recommendations, so you can pair both of them and work your way through making your resume optimizations and changes. So I haven't found any other resume reviewers who are offering the video component yet at this point. Lot will mark up your resume, hand it back to you, all marked up with suggestions, but mine has that video component. So I'm really excited about it. I've done some resume reviews in the past, and I really just wanted to make it a service so that I can help more people who have been DIYing their resumes, because a lot of people are doing a great job and just need like a little push in the right direction, and this is that solution for them.
Absolutely, and it cannot come from anyone better than yourself. This chat has been absolutely amazing, and you've covered such important topics, shared so much of value with me and the listeners. Thank you for your time, Kamara.
Thank you for
I
having
do
me.
appreciate you taking the time out for doing this.
Thank you very much for having me. I had a great time with you, and I really appreciate you having me on.